Hello, I'm Esther Gidhui-Ewart. It's Monday, June 27th. This is Africa 54.
Protesters rally in Spain to condemn the mass deaths of migrants at a Moroccan border fence after attempting to cross into Spain. South African authorities investigating the mysterious deaths of teenagers in an Eastern Cape province bar say the owner may face charges. And the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down the constitutional right to an abortion by overturning Roe v. Wade.
Hundreds of protesters rallied in Madrid on Sunday to condemn the deaths of at least 23 migrants by the Moroccan border fence in the aftermath of an attempted mass crossing into Spain on Friday. Clara Frank has more.
Demonstrators lay on the ground in a staged performance emulating videos that have emerged in the last 2 days, showing dozens of migrants lying on the ground, some bleeding and many appearing lifeless. Moroccan authorities say the disaster occurred after migrants attempted to breach a fence into the Melilla enclave, with some dying in a crush after what authorities are calling a stampede. Some 2,000 migrants had tried to reach Spanish territory by storming the enclave fence before battling border guards for 2 hours, with about 100 making it across the frontier. In Madrid, demonstrators rallied at Gallo Square, holding signs reading Black Lives Matter and 45 dead because of police violence, demanding safe routes for migrants.
The measures that can be taken are to open safe routes so that people want to ask for asylum can do so. This has been done for asylum seekers from other countries. From Ukraine, in 4 months, thousands of people have come to Spain. We do not understand why the same can be done for other countries.
Morocco says at least 23 migrants died and scores were injured. It says the death toll was 29, citing unnamed local medical officials. The mass crossing was the first attempted from Morocco into one of Spain's 2 northern African enclaves, since Rabat and Madrid agreed this year to bolster cooperation on border control. Clara Frank, VOA News.
The African Union Commission chief is voicing his shock at the violent and degrading treatment of African migrants trying to cross from Morocco into Spain. Musa Faki Mahamati said in a Twitter statement late Sunday, quote, "I call for an immediate investigation into the matter and remind all countries of their obligations under international law to treat all migrants with dignity and to prioritize their safety and human rights while refraining from the use of excessive force." South African authorities on Monday say the owner of a tavern where at least 17 teenagers were found dead and 4 others died while receiving medical care is expected to face charges. Police investigating the mysterious deaths in Eastern Cape province say they have not ruled out the possibility the teenagers were poisoned. Police were called to East London's Enyobeni Tavern, where local media reported the bodies were found slumped on the floor and tables. The tavern's owner told AFP news agency that patrons had tried to force their way into the bar despite it already being packed. But safety authorities were quick to rule out a stampede because of the lack of injuries on the bodies, some as young as 13 years old. 18 is the legal drinking age in South Africa. The Commonwealth Summit in Rwanda ended Sunday with the 56 members making broad commitments to address climate change and efforts to boost trade. The summit was aimed at shoring up the relevance of a group that evolved from the British Empire. The Commonwealth presents itself as a network for cooperation, but critics say it needs to carve out a more concrete role. Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland called for unity among the group's members.
But can I say the way in which our Commonwealth works is that we look at what joins us and not what separates us. And we know we're stronger together then we are apart. So if you look at the declarations we've made, the Living Lands Charter, a call to action on living lands, we know that we are at code red when it comes to climate change, and that the small member states are facing a crisis which could be existential.
Many human rights groups consider Rwanda among Africa's most repressive countries. The U.S. State Department has cited credible reports of arbitrary killings by the government, including politically motivated reprisal killings abroad. But Rwandan President Paul Kagame defended his country's human rights record, accusing Western governments of hypocrisy. Gabon and Togo were newly accepted into the Commonwealth, part of a trend of former French colonies in Africa seeking new alliances beyond Paris's old networks of influence. The coffin carrying the remains of slain Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba has returned to his home for an emotionally charged tour and burial more than 6 decades after his assassination. Paul Ndiho has more.
Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba's remains have been returned to his home nearly 60 years after his assassination. A plane carrying Lumumba's remains, a tooth that ex-colonial power Belgium handed over to his family, landed in the DRC last week from Belgium for a 9-day trip around the country. The coffin and accompanying delegation then flew to the central province of Sankuru, where the country's first post-independence leader was born in the village of Onalua in 1925. Jean-Jacques Lumumba, an activist and recipient of the International Award for Fighting Corruption, and was among the family members that received the remains. He spoke to VOA about the significance of the remains and the family's quest for justice.
This event is only the beginning of a clarification of this process. The apologies of the King Philip and the Prime Minister De Croo, whom we salute, cannot replace the whole of justice today. The greatest witness in our story remains impunity.
After resting in his native village, the coffin of the former Belgian Congo's first post-independence prime minister began its memorial pilgrimage to the northeastern city of Kisangani. A single tooth is all that remains of the young scholar and nationalist politician whose life and career was cut short in a dark struggle for leadership and control of resources in the Central African country. Lumumba's body was dissolved in acid after being killed, but a Belgian police officer kept the tooth as a trophy. In 1958, Lumumba launched a political party, the Congolese Movement, which won national elections in May 1960, a month before independence.
I insist about justice remains because justice is the only useful option to build a bright future. You know, the memory of our million of victims of yesterday and today deserves to be respected and to be honored. Congolese like justice and Lumumba family like justice.
From Kisangani, the coffin will be taken to Katanga in the southeast, where a secessionist movement raged after independence and Lumumba and his aides were tortured. The burial ceremony is planned for June 30th in Kinshasa, which is DRC's Independence Day. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Ethiopia's National Meteorological Institute says that the major rainy season is now beginning in several parts of the country. Meteorologist Meseret Mulone told VOA that Ethiopian precipitations will be sufficient during the coming months. She also said that the rains would not be interrupted unlike the previous failed seasons. In Oromia, the rain has started and farmers are heading back to their fields, according to agricultural officials and experts. However, a record drought in the Horn of Africa has wiped out crops and millions of cattle. Henry Wilkins reports from East Bale, Ethiopia.
At this makeshift camp in Gabana, herders are digging for roots that in normal times they would feed to their cattle. But the Horn of Africa's worst drought in decades killed their cattle weeks ago, and now there's nothing else to eat. The East Bale zone of Ethiopia, where Gabana is located, is at a crisis point.
So far this year, we haven't received any food, either from the government or other organisations. It's fallen to locals in the surrounding areas to help us. They even gave us the clothes we wear.
Until last year, Gabana residents say they were reliant on government handouts after conflict 6 years ago forced them from their farmland. They've been living in this makeshift camp ever since. The record drought has made many of the residents too weak with hunger to leave their tents.
I'm sick from hunger and lying in bed all day. I don't have enough to eat or drink.
A local aid worker says they're under-resourced and can offer little support.
Equipment they were provided with 6 years ago, like plastic sheets for shelter, have already fallen apart. The government has ignored them. They want to go back to being self-reliant, but for now they need food.
At a local hospital, one of the doctors says admissions for malnourished infants has nearly doubled compared to last year.
It's a minimal support with governmental and non-governmental cases, but it is a minimal, less rather than that last year's. So it's too difficult to manage our patients.
VOA spoke with the father of a child receiving treatment.
I
came here because my daughter is getting sick. I don't have any food to give her because I didn't receive any aid from the government or other institutions.
Ethiopia's National Disaster Risk Management Commission did not immediately respond to a request for comment. As for the residents at Gabana camp, it appears they can only hope that help will arrive soon. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, East Bale, Ethiopia.
The Sudanese military is accusing Ethiopia's army of executing 7 Sudanese soldiers and a civilian who were captives and displaying the bodies of the executed people to the public, vowing that the treacherous act will not pass without a response. There was no immediate response from Ethiopian authorities to a request for comment. Tensions between Sudan and Ethiopia have run high in recent years because of a spillover of the conflict in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region and Ethiopia's construction of a giant hydropower dam on the Blue Nile. Tens of thousands of refugees have fled into eastern Sudan, and there have been military confrontations in an area of contested farmland along the border between Sudan and Ethiopia. We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Be sure to watch Africa 54 Tuesday when Ninomudu has our health report. Still to come, the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down the constitutional right to an abortion. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll look at the U.S. investigation into the January 6, 2021 insurrection that has shaken the country. Many Americans believe their democracy has been threatened. What are the lessons for the United States and the rest of the world? We'll also look at power blackouts in African countries. Will they get worse? And how will countries on the continent meet their future energy needs? Join me, Hayley Adams, and my guests for an in-depth discussion on these issues on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other African news, Guinea Prime Minister Mohamed Bouazizi meets with civil society and political leaders Monday in preparation of a national dialogue aimed at writing a roadmap for the transition. Nigeria's Chief Justice Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad resigns amid corruption allegations. And in Mozambique, residents in the Mahincha district protest at the local police station demanding the release of 9 members of the community arrested last week in connection with the killing of 6 alleged cattle thieves, including 3 police officers. A conservative supermajority in the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down the constitutional right to an abortion by overturning Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision that legalized the procedure in the United States. The 6-3 court decision last week follows a move by the High Court to loosen restriction on guns in America, despite modest gun control measures passed by Congress and signed by President Joe Biden. VOA's Arashara Basadi has more on the ruling.
Demonstrators flocked to the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington Saturday following Friday's ruling overturning the constitutional right to an abortion. The ruling striking down Roe v. Wade, a nearly 50-year-old legal precedent protecting a woman's right to choose, was met with swift demonstrations. Friday, outside the Arizona State Capitol building, thousands of activists on both sides of the issue briefly disrupted a legislative session inside. Local media reports law enforcement fired tear gas on the crowd after demonstrators began banging on the building's glass doors. Overturning Roe is not a national ban on abortion, but it does send the decision back to individual states. Most Republican-led state houses appear ready to impose statewide bans, even in cases of rape, incest, or the well-being of the mother.
What was interesting about the Supreme Court decision is that it gave the authority back to the states to make these decisions. So now that this decision's been made, it'll be up to each of the states and the state legislators and the people there to talk to their elected representatives about what their laws look like closer to home.
The ruling follows other recent and controversial decisions by the Supreme Court, including relaxing gun laws at a time of bipartisan support for modest gun regulation following a wave of mass shootings.
This court has lost legitimacy. They have burned whatever legitimacy they may still have had after their gun decision, after their voting decision. They just took the last of it and set a torch to it with the Roe versus Wade opinion.
Overturning Roe may have far-reaching effects outside the United States. At an LGBTQ pride parade in Paris, some activists used the event as a call for France to cement into its constitution the right to an abortion. Much like the United States, France has had nearly a half-century of laws protecting abortion rights.
I feel like there's a sense of nationalism, patriarchy spreading, but the United States having such a conservative Supreme Court, they are literally taking all our rights away. As a young woman, I have always had the opportunity to have a choice for my body. Now my daughter, should she come to America, will no longer have that choice. I find it heartbreaking.
But back in the U.S., anti-abortion rights activists celebrated a decades-long quest to ban the procedure.
It's a very exciting moment for all of us. We had 80 pro-life people in one room together when we found out that the decision to overthrow happened, and we were all thrilled and excited, but we know that the work still needs to go on and there's much to be done.
Since Friday's ruling, at least 10 states have enacted abortion bans. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
The G7 conference wraps up Tuesday, and the White House says it's committed to countering issues near and far with tools like $600 billion infrastructure package seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative. VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell reports from Telfs, Austria.
The world's wealthiest liberal democracies have a lot of ground to cover as they meet in Germany for the G7 summit. The nearest challenge is fewer than 1,500 kilometers away from the meeting, with Kyiv, Ukraine coming under a new Russian attack over the weekend. Summit host German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Ukraine's security is a top priority. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will virtually address leaders Monday.
Germany and the U.S. will always act together when it comes to questions of Ukraine's security, and we made that clear once more.
The group said Sunday it will continue to squeeze Russia's war chest by banning imports of Russian gold, adding to the flotilla of sanctions on Russian oil, goods, banks, and high-profile individuals. But the leaders are also concerned about challenges posed by China. On Sunday, they announced a $600 billion infrastructure initiative, first visualized during the previous G7 summit, that aims to give developing nations an alternative to China's Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative.
I want to be clear. This isn't aid or charity. It's an investment that will deliver returns for everyone, including the American people and the people of all our nations. It'll boost all of our economies. It's a chance for us to share our positive vision for the future and let communities around the world see themselves and see for themselves the concrete benefits of partnering with democracies.
China analysts say the G7 faces stiff competition from the Belt and Road Initiative.
Not only the United States and Europe, but Japan, Australia are all very concerned about this, and they're all trying to bring choices to borrower countries so that countries don't have to go to China cap in hand to get loans, but can come to these new vehicles as well. The issue is that these vehicles are slow, they're bureaucratically cumbersome, they don't have that much money in the bank, they're not moving it out the door, they cannot compete with the fast money that China provides through BRI. And through providing that money, China is able to gradually build deference through dependence.
The group also added some seats at the table, inviting the leaders of South Africa and India to some of the meetings, held in the Bavarian Alps. Those last two countries recently attended the virtual BRICS summit, the bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, where Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke critically of Western democracy's efforts to economically isolate Russia.
To politicize, instrumentalize, and weaponize the global economy, and to willfully impose sanctions by taking advantage of one's dominant status in the international financial and monetary systems will only end up hurting one's own interests, as well as those of others, and inflict suffering on people around the world.
Faces challenges that touch everyone, from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to Zagreb, Croatia. Climate change, the pandemic, and global economic shocks. The meetings continue Monday. Anita Powell, VOA News, Tels, Austria.
Mariam Abdelatif from Egypt and Ahmed Bashir Aden from the United States are the winners of the first Quran recitation international competition held in Maryland just outside Washington, D.C. 25 participants from 14 countries participated in the competition organized by the Tibian Institute of Minnesota. VOA's Abdushakur Aboud has more.
The three-day event was held recently at the Diantes Center of the Turkish Mosque in Lanham, Maryland, with participants coming from New Zealand, Australia, Afghanistan, Norway, United States, as well as Nigeria. Imam Abdurrahman Kariye, one of the organizers, says that the participants were tested on their memorization, reciting, and understanding of the Quran.
This is an amazing and successful experience. Alhamdulillah, this brings back the spirit and the love of the Quran. The goal of the competition is not about the winner, but it's about reviving the love of reading it, memorizing it, preserving its tradition, and having such kind of gatherings allows these type of audience to experience what preserving the Quran feels like.
The participants, who were between the age of 18 to 25, were tested on how they recite, understand the verses, and making the least mistakes possible. Sumaya Muhammad, a student at the Tibian Institute, is happy that finally such a competition was held in the United States.
I think it was very inspiring seeing my sisters and brothers in Islam reciting the Quran in front of an esteemed panel of judges. So I think it motivates a lot of people to want to partake in future competitions, inshallah.
Such international competitions are usually held in a number of Islamic countries around the world. The more famous events are held in Turkey, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. The women's first place winner was Mariam Abdelatif from Egypt, and Ahmed Bashir Aden was the men's winner from the United States. They both won $5,000 US.
This just means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with the Quran here in the United States of America. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us moving forward and make us those who lift the Quran in this country.
Organizers believe the historic competition will put the United States on the map as an organizer and host of such a prestigious competition. Abdul Shakur Aboud, VOA News, Washington.
That's our show for today. We invite you to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Insecurity makes our world less stable. When water is scarce, it becomes more difficult for communities to produce food, more difficult to protect public health and to drive economic growth. Water insecurity also makes our world less safe. Disputes between countries or communities over limited water resources can predictably, and by extension, over time, provoke armed conflict. Plan will help our country prevent conflict and advance cooperation among nations, increase equity and economic growth, and make our world more inclusive and resilient. Water scarcity is a global problem, and it must be met with a global solution.